Have you ever had an epic lightsaber duel as an adult? No? Nobody? Yeah, neither have I. That's absolute nerd talk. That's just way too far. But I do remember as a kid growing up and having these epic lightsaber duels. And if I remember correctly, 99.9% of all of those lightsaber duels ended with somebody getting their finger smashed by a lightsaber. They basically never ended on good terms. If you never had a lightsaber duel as a kid, I don't know, I guess you didn't have a great childhood. But all jokes aside, I actually decided to do something that I rarely do on the channel, and that is to give you guys a quick little review, a quick little unboxing for a figure that a lot of people have been excited for now, but it seems like decades maybe. We are taking a look at the Driodeka Battle Droid Black Series action figure from Hasbro. This has just been shipping out over the past couple of days. I know there are already some reviews out there from people that were able to acquire these overseas, but if you did pre-order these, you should be receiving them within the next few days. I received mine about 2 days prior to the recording of this video. The original retail price for this is $34.99. If you missed out the first pre-order window and you're looking to buy it third party, it's already going up there within the range of like $70, but just be patient. I do believe that they will restock on this particular figure. It does seem like a very hot item, something that Black Series collectors are going after. And as I mentioned prior to like the Super Battle Droid, for example, a lot of these are army builders, so collectors will definitely pick up multiples. It's just what they do. Anyways, let's get straight into the figure, and I'll get the first part out of the way because it feels like I haven't watched any other reviews, but it feels like that's what everybody's going to go to, and that is the engineer work, the body molding, the articulation. All of that stuff is top notch. I mean, I don't think I have any complaints when it comes down to that. They did a phenomenal job of putting this figure together. And look, I've never done any type of like 3D printing. I also have a very small experience when it comes down to customizing. But just looking at the figure, looking at all the inner workings, like I said, it's definitely worth commending Hasbro and the engineer team behind this, because they did an absolutely phenomenal job. Having said that, the figure definitely comes with a bunch of issues. As you guys can see, the little head piece is extremely loose. Essentially from the moment that you try to articulate it, it's already crumbling and falling on its own weight. It does come on a little ball joint, so it is semi-articulated, but that's one of the bigger issues that you're going to have. Another big issue that I ran into was the shoulder, or I don't know what necessarily the correct terminology for this is, but the entire right arm is just really loose, so it kind of like falters. So if you're just displaying it right out of the packaging, the figure is going to look a little bit lopsided, almost like it's, you know, falling over to the right side. A big, huge gripe, a big, huge issue. And I know that there are really simplistic ways of fixing that, but it just feels like something that shouldn't come that way out of the packaging. Aside from all the engineer work and how phenomenal it was put together, this is just something that, at least in my personal opinion, should not be happening, especially at a deluxe price point, at that $35 price point. Now, to be brutally honest, in terms of articulation, when I first saw the reveal for this figure, I just assumed that the lower torso is going to be more of like a statuesque type figure, and it was going to be semi-articulated. Maybe just the arms and the head would be able to have some articulation, but no, I mean, Hasbro really went all out. Where the arm is attached to the torso, you actually have some forward and backward motion, so you can tilt the arm however it is that you prefer it. Same thing with the elbow articulation. By the way, there is some limitation when it comes down to that like shoulder area, just because there are some like tubing and wiring that happens there, and I'm not sure why Hasbro would decide to do this, but it's kind of like limiting the articulation. I think if you articulate it too much, you are going to detach those or rip those apart. But when it comes down to like the elbow, by the way, I'm using human anatomy. I don't know exactly what the terminology is for a battle droid, but or a Driodeka figure, but the elbow area does get some pretty good range of motion. You can articulate it all the way up and all the way backwards, as well as the the claws or the legs, very well articulated as well. The right and the left one have some flaps on hinges so you can articulate it forward and backward. The back one does not have the hinges, however it does have a ball joint that you can articulate upwards and backwards. Same thing with the lower level of the leg, also has some really good range of motion. And also a cool neat little feature about this figure, you can actually stand it up comparatively to how you would picture the figure scaling, because obviously this is kind of up in the air. We've seen scaling from the film be a little bit different from the animated series, also to the comic books. All of them have kind of like different scaling. It's really difficult to figure out the proper size for a Driodeka, but if you kind of mess around with the legs, you can kind of display it at a slightly bigger height than a clone, and you can also have it be a little bit more like a crouch, kind of a wider base for the figure. And so in terms of the scaling, I'm not really a big stickler for that, but if you are, you can kind of play around with the figure and have it display adequately depending on what your line is. I mean, there are going to be people that place these in with their SH action figures, which tend to be a little bit bigger from time to time than the Black Series figures. I am also slightly disappointed with the fact that this particular action figure does not come with blast effects. I think the same thing happened with that newer Super Battle Droid. I could be wrong, but I believe the original one did not come with the blast effect piece, and then the single release may come with one, or I may have that switch, but one of them does come with a blast effect piece, and this was one of those figures that I think would have greatly benefited from that. All in all, I don't want to drag this out. I don't want to make this video longer than it has to be. If you guys are interested in picking up this figure, if you guys want like the main talking points, I will say that QC wise there were some issues. The functionality of the figure is definitely going to come into question here. Even though the molding here and the engineering, yes, it's absolutely phenomenal, if those functionality issues are present, especially when it comes down to like the loose joints and things of that nature, I think it definitely brings the figure down from a level that I personally feel like it could have easily been one of the greatest Black Series ever released. And I will say I would have preferred the trade-off. I would have preferred lesser articulation, more statuesque type figure, if it meant that a lot of the joints were going to be tighter and I wasn't going to have to fiddle around too much with it. I would have preferred that rather than a really heavily articulated figure that just has too many issues when it comes down to QC. Don't even get me started on the absolute uselessness of having it turn into a ball without it being able to roll, which again, I don't really see anybody displaying the figure that way. It just seems like an absolute waste from Hasbro. They could have easily used that portion of the budget or those funds towards maybe some blast effects or just different things, maybe a wash on the figure to bring out the details, especially around the joints and the articulation. But again, it is what it is. This is the figure that we get. I don't like giving numbered scores, but if I had to, this would be a very solid 7, like a 7.6. I think this could have easily been close to a 9 if I didn't run into those small little issues. But again, because of the price point you're paying, if you're ordering from like Big Bad Toy Store with taxes and shipping, you're paying somewhere around the lines of like a little bit over or under $40 if I'm not mistaken. So it's definitely not a cheap figure tone, and it's going to be even more expensive if you plan on army building. I picked up 2 myself. I may double down if I see it later, just because of the army building potential, but not because the figure is worth it. I think it's a little bit disappointing. Not the worst figure ever, and I do feel like everybody should at least have one of these in their display, especially if they're big Star Wars / Black Series fans. But like I mentioned, it is a tad bit disappointing, just in my personal opinion. Let me know your thoughts down below. Did you pick this figure up? Do you plan on picking it up? Do you agree, disagree? Let me know your thoughts down below. I'm always very curious to see what the community as a whole has to say. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys enjoy this type of content, make sure you stay tuned because we are constantly uploading random nonsense like this. Again, thank you for tuning in. And as always, guys, make sure you enjoy the hobby. That's the most important thing about it. Stay safe out there, and I will see you guys in the next one.